Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Spark Faith podcast. I am Dr. Chris Sargent, and I have a really unique and interesting individual today. Y'all know I don't have very many men on my podcast, and yet I have opened up and have had a whole slew of them lately. So I'm so excited to welcome Sathiya Sam. He is the go-to guy for porn recovery. Now, I realize that this is not something I normally talk about on my show. So I'm just going to put that out there that, if you've got some sensitive ears, maybe you want to put your AirPods in or put your headphones on because this is probably going to be a more adult conversation. And let's take it away. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Chris. You did a great interview on my
Absolutely.
show, and I'm honored to return the favor here.
It's so much fun to talk to you. You're a really interesting and cool guy. I love what you are championing, and I just love to for you to tell my audience a little bit about how you ended up here.
Yeah, obviously very unique kind of work. Not every day you hear about somebody doing this kind of stuff. I had my own story. I think that's the quickest way to explain why I'm here. Had a 15-year addiction to pornography, really struggled, grew up in an environment that really should have set me up for success in life, and for the most part did actually. And I was kind of the last person you'd think to have something like this behind closed doors, but I did. About 10 years in, I vowed to change my life and to not have this anymore. And I always told myself I could stop whenever I wanted to, like a true addict. And when push came to shove and it really came time to actually pursue freedom, I realized I had no idea how to do it. I kind of just relied on willpower and white knuckling. A lot of the things that you would see your clients do when they're trying to change something with food or exercise or whatever it might be, it was very much the same kind of surface level solutions that just had me spinning my tires and feeling really frustrated because I was doing everything that I thought you were supposed to do. I was trying. It was not from a lack of effort, but I couldn't, from the life of me, figure out how to actually get this thing under control. And about 3 years in is where I realized that I was really going about this the completely wrong way. And I had a completely different approach that was introduced to me that was really a lot more about getting to the heart of the matter, getting underneath the surface, tackling the more causal elements, again, very similar to your work, Dr. Chris, in
Mhm.
the physical realm. And that's when my life really began to change. And once I did discover, I felt like, man, I found like the secret stash of gold. Like nobody's talking about this. I almost couldn't believe it. It was so valuable for me. It really did change my life. I've been clean for 8 years now. And when I was in sort of that transitory part of my recovery where I was really gaining momentum, I just vowed like, if this is actually what I think it is, once I get free, I'll do everything in my power to help other people get free too. And so February 2016, I had my last relapse. I waited about 2.5 years before I really felt, I would say, clearance from God to kind of launch it and do it myself. It's a completely different thing to take this on as a company and to help other guys. And so I waited patiently to make sure that it was the right timing. And we've been off to the races ever since, going strong 5.5 years. We've helped hundreds, well, really, we've helped thousands of guys quit pornography around the world, restored a lot of marriages, seen a lot of relationships restored, and a lot of guys just stepping into their calling and becoming everything God made them to be as a result. So that's the Coles Notes version of the story.
I love that. I love that. So, what are some of the root causes of getting addicted to porn? I assume it's very similar to some of the same things like you said with food.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that there's going to be a great crossover, y'all, for the strategies to get under this addiction is going to
Hmm.
be a similar strategy that we can use to get under our food addictions and our poor habit addictions. So
Yeah.
help me understand some of that.
It's such a good question. I think it's probably easiest to start with what are not the root issues. So let's talk
Okay.
about that first. A lot of people resort to internet filters, willpower, white knuckling, balancing the eyes, the self-control, even accountability partners. There's a lot of value there. We have a value for it, but a lot of the ways those systems are executed is very poor and very ineffective. These solutions are not actually valuable long term because they're really the equivalent of running over a weed with a lawnmower. So temporarily, everything looks good, but as long as the root system is there, it's only a matter of time before things grow back. So
Right.
it's helpful for us to just start there because I think people think like, man, I put the internet filter on. That makes sense. I'm watching on my device, and if I can just block myself from accessing on my device, then surely I won't watch it. But as you and I know, if you're not tackling the causal elements or if you're not uprooting these problems, it's only a matter of time. They're going to return either the same way with a vengeance, or they're going to return a different way, and it's going to be a little bit more masked and covert. So there's really three buckets that most issues fall into at a root level for people dealing with porn addiction. The first is self-awareness. And we have mantras for each of these. So I'll share my mantras as well because I think it'll be helpful. The mantra for
Absolutely.
self-awareness is if you are not aware, it cannot be repaired. If you are not aware, it cannot be repaired. So I work exclusively with men. When men come to me, a lot of them say, I just need to turn down my sex drive. I don't know how to manage it. Or they say, it's always like they always kind of reduce pornography to the sexual component of it. And it's like, that's why I just can't control myself. I get these urges. But the reality is there's belief systems, there's emotions, there's thinking patterns, there's paradigms and perceptions taking place underneath the surface. And until they have an awareness of it, you really have no hope of actually stopping things before they reach a point where you're caught between a rock and a hard place. The second bucket is what we would call transformation of the heart or trauma of the heart. These are the things that often hold people back. It's past experiences. You'd be surprised how many of these experiences are not sexual in nature, but they impact people's sexual development nonetheless. And so root issues are often here, and parent-child dynamics, that's another big one.
Mm.
How is sex framed growing up, often implicates how we actually experience sex when we become adults and beyond. So that's another big one. Our mantra there is he who is most vulnerable heals the quickest. And so when we
Yeah.
reach the second bucket, this is an invitation for people to really open up, to really dig into the deeper parts of themselves. And this is where we really see people begin to change. And that leads to, I would say, the third bucket. The third bucket on the, what's the root issue would be faulty belief systems and a lack of self-esteem. And on the flip side, when people really embrace this, we would describe it as a shift in their identity. And so our mantra here is people reach a place where they would rather be 100% themselves and rejected than 80% themselves and accepted. And so we're teaching people
Say that
to,
again, because I think that's huge because we as a society just want to we as humans just want to be included and
yeah.
like to be like even from the Brene Brown like inclusion and included and feel like we belong somewhere. So this
Yeah.
is a little bit of a different thought process. So
Yeah,
say that
well,
again.
yeah, it's actually the same. It's that the worst feeling in the world is to get a sense of belonging by being someone you're not.
True.
So
It's
the
true.
the whole premise is you first must be true to yourself and then accepted. And so that's why we encourage people, when you're going through this identity shift, you're shedding an old identity that was wrapped up in addiction and low self-esteem and dysfunctional relationships. Embracing this new identity is about reaching this place where you would rather be 100% yourself and rejected. You would choose to be your true self, even if it meant rejection from other people, than be 80% yourself and accepted. So it is the deprioritization of acceptance socially and from those around you in place of being true to yourself, being your authentic self. And that's the natural byproduct of the first two things I talked about, building that self-awareness, going through that transformation, recovering from traumas, really learning to be vulnerable and accepting who you are, and then boldly and unapologetically expressing it to the world. And this is why a lot of the guys that go through our system end up changing careers, getting promotions, starting that business they always wanted to start, stepping up in church leadership, whatever it might be. We see a lot of these big leaps that take place because that's just what happens when your identity shifts that dramatically.
Oh my gosh. Okay, mic drop right there. That's it. Bye. Kidding. Um, but seriously, that's the same with food. It is the same when we can manage our food or exercise habits in the same way, right? We tend to cover up, like let's just take the secret eating that people do, right? Because people do
Mm,
that in secret too.
yeah.
And they do it because they're of potentially parent-child interactions or past trauma, right? They
Hmm.
do it because of the fact that they're not completely aware that they had that past trauma,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
right?
funny, actually.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, and I never really thought about this, but food has the three A's that pornography has as well. It's affordable, it's accessible, and it's anonymous, or at least it can be anonymous.
Hmm.
And those things are making pornography rampant in our culture. And I mean, you don't have to look far, yeah, on the eating side of things as well. There's tons of heart disease and obesity and all kinds of issues people are having with their bodies for the same reason. And that's what amplifies all of these things. It's all three of them. Even just to have two would be really damaging, but to have all three is devastating, and it makes it really hard to break out of those cycles.
I totally agree. And I think that it's being vulnerable in that place of anonymity,
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
right? Because we can all eat in the closet or our bedroom or the TV room with nobody watching, and it doesn't count, right? Until we go to the doctor or until we can't pull our jeans on anymore. And then, right? And then it's smacking us in the face and it makes our self esteem go down, right?
Yeah.
It's never a good feeling when your jeans don't fit,
Yeah.
right? It's not. And so then it just becomes this negative feed forward cycle of eating more and um stealing away and avoiding people even more and more and more
Yeah.
instead of just actually taking that step forward and saying, you know what, I ate an entire pack of Oreos last night in the closet,
Yeah.
right? Or in your case, it might be porn on their
Yep.
phone.
Yep,
It's the
100%.
same.
And it is what you said is so true. Like we do these things behind closed doors. We tell ourselves like it's just a glance, it's just a video, it's just this one off, and then I'm gonna get back on track. And then you put on the jeans and the pants don't fit you. Or in our case, it's, guys start to have poor sexual performance, or they can't
Mhm.
connect with their significant others. They start to feel hopeless. They lose their sense of motivation, et cetera, et cetera. We should get into some of that because I think your audience would be interested in it. But
Absolutely.
the real devastation is actually that you lied to yourself. That's what makes this so crippling. And no real change happens until you're willing to confront the truth within yourself. So, like you said, it's like, yeah, I ate a case of Oreos yesterday. That kind of honesty, that's where healing begins. And that's why we actually don't work with a lot of people who approach us because they're actually not willing to be fully honest about their situation. And we just realize we can't help you if you're living in denial, even a fraction. We want people who are fully transparent. They understand the depth of it, and they're saying, "Look, I want help." And I'm sure it's the same for you. You get way better patient outcomes when people are actually ready and being honest.
Yep. I get, you know what? We all get what the client or patient is willing to put in, right? If they're willing
Yes.
to be 80% honest, then they're going to get about 80% better. If
Yeah.
they're only going to take their supplements, 75% of the time, they're only going to get a 75% result. So it's
Hmm.
the same with you. I mean, with food, we still have to have food, right? Like that's the whole
Yes.
thing. With alcohol is different, right? You don't have to have alcohol, you don't have to have porn, but you still have to manage food. But
Yep.
I think finding that more authentic way to actually manage your food is what you're talking about, or to manage your porn.
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly it. And it's got to start with honesty and again, like I would agree porn is not a necessity the same way that food is, but I can guarantee you whatever
Probably feels
need
like it.
pornography is actually meeting is a necessity. And
Hmm.
there's nobody gets a pass. Whatever your addiction is, there's a reason it's there, and it is probably meeting some need that you haven't learned to meet effectively. And obviously it's the same with food. So I think it goes without saying if we're getting to the roots of the issues, these are the kinds of things we want to be tackling first and foremost.
So you said something about the how porn actually affects men's health, men's sexual drive, men's self-esteem, and then how does that affect the marriage? And I do think that my audience, y'all, right? Y'all would probably be interested in hearing that, particularly um, even for my single friends, like how does that affect relationships that we're trying to create,
Yeah.
godly relationships, really?
Yep.
And how does that all play out? So help me understand um, how porn and sexual addiction actually prevents. I mean, I probably know the answer, but I think you can put it more succinctly. How does that impact our marriages and our relationships
Okay, so I've been doing a lot
and
of content on
performance?
this. Yeah, and performance for sure. Yeah, no, I'll touch it. I'll touch on all of it. So I've been doing lots of content on this for Instagram and the podcast lately and gained a lot of responses. So I think it's good that we're going here. Let's talk about the relationship side of it first. So a couple things happen in a relationship when pornography is introduced. Number one, there's actually studies showing that watching porn reduces a guy's capacity for empathy. Empathy and
Mm,
attachment. I don't know how much you've gotten to attachment theory, but it's very, very important for our relationship formations early on and how we form relationships later on in life. And those literally the pathways, the AVP pathways is what they're referred to. They are affected by people who view pornography. They're reduced. So someone loses their capacity for
interesting.
empathy. You can only imagine how that's going to impact a guy's ability to connect or really meaningfully have a relationship with another person. That's really just scratching the surface. If you follow some of the other studies, what they show is that pornography eventually decreases relationship and sexual satisfaction in any kind of partnership or arrangement. And there's a couple of reasons for this. The reason on the relationship side is because once again, whatever need pornography is meeting for an individual, it's probably supposed to be met in a relationship. So if you continually turn to pornography, you will not turn to that relationship. And the woman can usually feel like something's wrong here. Something's not adding up. And sometimes they can put their finger on it and sometimes they can't. But the relationship quality really begins to suffer as this goes on for longer periods of time. On the more sexual part of it, this is actually a common thing now. Couples watch pornography together. They try to spice up the relationship or get some ideas. And what we see in the research is short term, this can actually be effective. They'll report higher levels of sexual satisfaction and whatnot. But over longer periods of time, it starts to completely tank. And the reason is very simple. Imagine if you condition yourself or you program yourself to be aroused by somebody other than your partner on a regular basis. What do you think is going to
Right.
happen when you guys are in a fight and the need arises, the urge arises? Well, you already have another option. And suddenly now that option starts to become easier. And the other side of it is that porn is what they call a supernormal stimulus, which means the level of stimulation it provides to the brain it's insurmountable, it's incalculable. It's not supposed to be that way, and it pales in comparison to a normal sexual experience. So what happens if you watch enough of this is that you may be able to have a real sexual experience if you're lucky, and we'll get into the physical side of it in a minute. And if you are, it just doesn't scratch the itch the same way because you have set the threshold for arousal and performance so high that no woman could possibly meet it, or man, depending on who we're talking about here. But
Right.
the point is, that this is why your sexual satisfaction really does tank when pornography is around long enough.
That is, again, that's so profound. I think so many people don't understand that, but it's the same with sugar.
Right.
Sugar has that same addictive quality. You have to keep having more and more and more and more and more in
Hmm.
order to, and we have certainly many prescription medications are like that, and drugs in general, but sugar is one of those such so highly addictive substances that you just have to keep having more and more and more in order to, like you say, scratch that itch of I
Yeah.
need something sweet. And now it's not just a quick cookie after dinner, it's the whole package, or it's the whole pie instead of just a piece. And
Yep.
it gets in the way.
Yeah, or it gets more covert, right? That's the other direction. So it's like, oh,
Absolutely.
oh, I don't binge candy anymore, but then you find out they're putting like gallons of barbecue sauce on their chicken, and turns out the sauce
It's
has tons of sugar in it, right? Like it's
it's the same.
it's
Yeah.
the same idea. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we see it with alcoholics all the time, or recovering alcoholics, right? They smoke, or they eat sugar, they have a bag of candy with them all the time, or
Yeah.
that just diverts from the alcohol.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yes, I'd rather have my clients chewing gum than drinking 40 beers a day, but
Yeah.
how do we get under the issue of that need? Where's the trauma that happened that's creating this issue?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what all of this boils down to. Like you think about someone who binges sugar or alcohol or pornography, there's some need underlying there that's getting met through this, be it in a really terrible way, a very ineffective way. And you have to be able to identify those things. You know, one question we love to ask our clients is what, like, especially when if they're trying to break down like a relapse. So, you know, they've gone through a program or they're in it and they had a slip. And we always say like you only look at your past long enough to learn. So if it happened, we want to at least understand what was going on. Let's learn from it and see if we can use it in the future to be more preventative. And one of the questions we love to ask in this conversation is, what was porn offering you? What did it offer you? What was it providing you in that moment? Was
Mm.
it comfort? Was it connection? Was it stress relief? You know, whatever it might be. Those clarifying questions go a really long way for us to get some clues on what's really going on. And once you know that, again, going back to the self-awareness piece, once you understand that part of it, well, then you can actually start to ask yourself, okay, what would be a better way to experience comfort in those moments and start to come up with some new solutions. So I think, you know, this sort of inner part is really important. And again, if let's say it was comfort, let's say it's like, yeah, you know what? I've been feeling really overwhelmed. Life's been really stressful lately. Maybe you've gone through a life transition. This was just giving me some temporary comfort from the chaos that is my life. Well, if you're in a marriage or you're in a committed relationship, what would it look like for you to actually maybe open up to your partner a little bit about what's going on
Mm.
and get comfort that way? And you can start to see now how people's relationships can actually radically turn around if they can start to get clarity on some of these dynamics underneath the surface. Because usually, whatever the dynamics are that are at play, they affect first the individual, but then second, their intimate relationships. And obviously the relationship with God is included in that. And I think that's where like these two subjects are grossly intertwined. You can't separate someone who's addicted from their relationship life. They inevitably blend together. And if one area is suffering, so too will the other. And if one is getting better, then usually the other one improves as well.
But I find that to be true with my clients as well, whether it's
Oh
food or
yeah.
exercise or whatever. It's the same, right? They're looking to that. They come home, they've had a hard day, and the first thing is, well, I deserve,
Right.
right? That's the language that
Yeah.
is in the back of people's heads. Well, I deserve to have something good.
Yeah.
I, you know, I don't do, and then it becomes this comparison scale, right? Well, I
Hmm.
don't do porn, so I eat cookies, right? Like,
Yeah. Right.
like not that one is better than the other,
Yeah.
actually, but
Yeah.
we think, right? Not like God. We think that one is better than the other or not, but they get to this place, and you're right. If um if if I would say to myself, oh, well, I deserve to have whatever, my giant bowl of popcorn, which does happen occasionally. Um, um, but it's calculated now, which is a different mindset,
Yes.
right? But if I
Yep.
just did that all the time, like I did before I realized it was a problem, um, then you're right. I wasn't taking that moment to say to my significant other, hey, you know what? I had a really crappy day, and here's what happened. And if I would have just done that, then the need for the popcorn goes away.
hmm Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or like you
So
said,
opening up, taking a walk. I mean, there's a lot
yeah.
of other ways that you can handle it.
Yeah, either the need goes away or you feel in control of the need and the need doesn't control
Mm,
you.
right.
And even just that shift is like pretty fundamental because usually when we really boil down to why people engage in addictive and binging kind of behavior, usually the needs underneath are actually very valid. Like nobody's doing it out of these weird, superficial, vain kind of needs. It's fundamental needs for connection, comfort, a sense of worthiness. One thing that we're seeing right now with the development of AI technology, which is giving people, unbelievably real sexual experiences, even though they're digitally manufactured, is a lot of guys, especially young men, are opting for these because there's no risk of rejection. You know, they can get basically whatever they want. They can get it customized exactly to their preferences and their desires. And it's sort of this avenue of convenience. It's easier. There's no risk. There's no chance of failure. You know, it starts to really play into these deeper narratives that maybe somebody doesn't feel confident, they don't feel like it's worth taking risks, it's too scary. Like all of these things are at play and literally could be the very driving factors behind somebody's sexual misbehavior. So it really, like, the better you understand yourself, yeah, I can tell your wheels are spinning. What's on your mind?
No, I mean that's just actually like, I mean my jaw would have dropped if I couldn't have held it into place. It didn't even occur to me that AI, that people could go down that road so far that that becomes their relationship. But then how,
Yeah.
when does that end or how does that go? Because at some point that is not fulfilling. It
Yeah,
is
no.
one-sided.
No, it's not even really fulfilling from the beginning. But I think what happens is, guys in particular, their sexual experiences are very driven by dopamine, and so it
Right.
is fulfilling on the dopamine level, at least initially. Now, like we said, like that threshold gets pushed, and typically what happens if people stay in sexual misbehavior long enough cyclically is they begin to no longer watch, the normal mainstream stuff. They start to watch obscure things, or
Mhm.
eventually a digital experience doesn't cut it for them, and then they start paying for it or buying or whatever it might be.
Okay.
Like it
So they
progresses
up
and it
the ante
worsens.
at some place, some point.
100%. Yeah. So the fulfillment, the problem is though, people are growing up in such dysfunctional relationships from a very young age. Like you have a lot of broken homes, a lot of broken marriages. And so their sense of what a fulfilling relationship is totally distorted to begin with anyways. So there's a predisposition for, this kind of sexual misbehavior because in some ways they don't know any better. They don't know any different. So is it fulfilling? No, but is it kind of just maybe making things a bit easier and it's, not really that much more dysfunctional than what they grew up with? Yeah. So
Sure.
it's a lot more about setting the standard of what a healthy person looks like, what healthy relationships look like, and even a healthy body looks like. We haven't even gotten to the physical side effects of porn addiction yet, but that's another huge part of it is people are actually disrespecting their body when they engage in this kind of behavior.
You know what? Let's go right down that road because I am all about being a steward of the body, right? Like that's my
Yeah.
jam. That's what I feel like. I feel like when we can get to that place where God's love can overtake our immediate needs, even in for comfort in the moment.
Yeah.
If we can just remember, I mean, at the time of this, we're 2 or 3 days off of Easter, right? So, like just remembering that piece, right?
Yeah.
And then that all of a sudden that changes how we can look at food. It can change how we look at any addiction, really, if we can remember the depth of God's love for us. But that's
Yeah.
not always an easy road to get there either. So go
No.
ahead. Let's be stewards of our body so that we can make choices out of love. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
man. Sorry, I have to say this now because you just made such a good point. In 1 Corinthians 6, Paul talks about how we are temples of the Holy Spirit, and
Yep.
and any temple of God's is holy. And it's he's talking about the body. The 1 Corinthians 6 is literally all about the body, and it's
Mhm.
all about healthy sexual morality, right? Like taking care of your body in a godly way, seeing it as a temple of God, seeing it as holy, and that it really is. That's the premise. That's kind of what we're after. Porn addiction takes us in the opposite direction, and there's good research now that's showing there's probably five main physical side effects. I did a podcast segment on this. I would say there's probably more, but these five are the most prevalent. Okay, you ready for this, Dr. Chris?
Got it. Let's go.
Okay. Okay, first one is a condition. This is actually clinical now. Porn-induced erectile dysfunction. So
Well,
this is where a man literally is just not able to perform simply because what he is experiencing in real life does not match the threshold that's been set by the pornography he has been viewing.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
fully understand. I mean, even visually, right? I mean, we're normal women out here with all kind of lumps and bumps, and they're looking
Yeah.
at perfection, if you will. And that just doesn't
Yeah.
always, that does not match up.
Yeah, and they're looking at perfection like yes, a lot of the actors and actresses have had their bodies touched up in different ways, but then people also forget it's a production. So like there's somebody who's going, "Cut. No, okay, redo this again, do it this way." Like it's perfectly produced because they know
Right.
exactly how to tap into those brain centers. So the first is PIED, porn-induced erectile dysfunction. The second one is premature ejaculation. The third is delayed ejaculation. So you kind of have two polarizing responses depending on the body, depending on how you've engaged with the content. The fourth is eating disorders. Okay, there's actually a research
Oh
study
my
came out of
gosh.
Australia, I believe it was, or maybe it's Israel or Australia, that basically showed men who view pornography are more likely to engage in eating disorder behavior, binge purging, all that kind of stuff. And the linking piece is body dysmorphia, right? Because men see these perfectly sculpted individuals with appendages that are abnormally above average, and they feel like they can't measure up. They start to get very insecure about their bodies, and naturally,
It's the
it leads into
same
food.
as women,
Right. Exact same. Yeah, exact same. Yeah, you could
but
do
now
this.
it's happening to men more often.
Well, I think people are just documenting it
And just,
more with men. I think women have
yeah.
it way harder. Like I don't think there's any way around that. I just think it's now being shown specifically in men in correlation with viewing pornography. And then the fifth way,
That's
I think
interesting.
this fifth one's absolutely fascinating to me. But there's actually studies showing that people who view porn are more likely to experience infertility. And I'm sure you know this. We have an infertility crisis in North America.
Huge. I deal with it all
Huge.
the time.
Yeah, and again, like obviously diet, lifestyle, like all of these things are at play. Tons of, pharmaceuticals and carcinogens and all that kind of stuff. Not negating that. However, in that conversation, nobody talks about porn usage, even though there's actually like clinical research now that would suggest men who view pornography have lower sperm counts, very like abnormally low sperm counts, and poor semen quality. And there's three specific qualities, I guess you could say, that each of these men had where there was a lower rate of infertility, of fertility rather. The first is that they were exposed to porn at a young age. The second is that they were high frequency viewers. And if you ever comb through the data, Dr. Chris, you'll see these two things come up again and again. Like what motivates somebody to go and pay for sex, or what predisposes them to go to a brothel and enjoy a night there? Um, Early exposure and frequent porn viewership. What
Oh,
causes people to have all this sexual dysfunction in their relationships? Early exposure, frequent viewership. Like again and again, these two things come up again. But the third thing in this particular study that marked these guys who experienced higher rates of infertility is that they coupled porn viewership with masturbation. And again, that's a very controversial point because there's lots of research that would suggest masturbation in of itself is, a healthy function. It can be a great way to get in touch with your body. I don't have much of an argument against those studies. It's just interesting that when these two are coupled together, they actually have a detrimental effect on the reproductivity of another person's body. And I think that's just worth paying attention to, especially in the context of treating your body like a temple, seeing your body as something
right.
that is holy, made in the image of God. It's really interesting to me. So again, those are the five main things that I've identified. I'm sure there's way more, but those are the main ones.
Wow, that's very eye-opening. And I think it's interesting that, particularly as we back up to the eating disorder piece, that, I don't think that, I mean, I've treated women my entire career with body dysmorphia, and
Mm,
it's the ones that come in and they like, you look at them and you're like, what do you mean?
yeah.
Like you look amazing, and they're the ones that actually often suffer the most.
Yes.
Um, yeah, that's so interesting because that's those images are so frequent and again exposed at a young age, and I think that that's happening now all the time. I mean, our
Yeah.
kids have these phones right at such an early age and they can get anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, when I started doing this work officially, which was 2018, the age of first exposure on average was like somewhere between 10 to 12 years old. And now studies would suggest it's probably more like 8 to 10, just because people
They're
are get
babies.
they're babies, yeah. And this is like so this is the dark side of it that I don't get into in every single interview, but we might as well go there while we're here, which is that children are not stumbling upon this stuff by accident, right? So the porn industry knows exactly what they're doing because they know that if they can get kids exposed, not full on exposed because you don't want to traumatize them, but they just put the little breadcrumb trail, right? Just a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit more,
Mm.
skin showing or whatever it is. They know that if they can get them exposed at a young age, they're more likely to have them for life. And if they have them for life, they can monetize and they can profit off of them. So
Well, that's
this is all
even
by design.
legitimate videos. Sorry to talk over you, but that's like
Mhm.
even just legitimate music videos, right?
Sure. Yeah, great example. Yeah. Yeah. And I
Or
mean,
even, I mean, I hate to call out any particular network that focuses on children and has two theme parks in this country, um, with castles, um,
yeah.
right?
Rhymes with
But
Disney. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But gee whiz, like, we went from Mickey Mouse Club, and all those kids were exposed to all kind of
Yeah.
horrible things that we know about now, and now it's coming out on like about Nickelodeon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know.
It's
Yeah.
a huge, huge issue. And again, I don't want to call anything out, but it's not my jam to smash anybody. But at the same time, it's in the news. This
Yeah.
isn't.
Yeah. There was well, there is an organization called Exodus Cry, and they wanted to do they've done a bunch of different stuff over the years. They've been responsible for some really good initiatives that have made honestly a huge difference in our world in this particular space. There was about a 5 year stint where they did research and collected data about sex traffickers and people who were being trafficked, but additionally the men in particular who were buying and paying for sex in these different brothels. So 5 years, 5 years, they're just asking, why are you here? How long have you been coming? What keeps you coming back? All that kind of stuff.
Ugh,
And yeah,
sorry.
um, and there,
Sorry, I just got that
yeah, two major
full
conclusions
body.
came from their research. Very, very insightful. The first was that one thing that these men all had in common, because we're talking about different races. They went to all the red light districts around the world. So you have young and old, you have rich and poor, you have married and singles, and guys with kids and guys without kids and whatever. The one thing they all had in common is they got exposed to porn at a young age. So that in of itself tells us if we can reduce the early exposure, we could actually really change the trajectory of a lot of different insidious industries, sex trafficking included. The second thing that they deduced is that the porn industry is the marketing department for sex traffickers. So it's the exposure to pornography that predisposes men in particular to go and engage in this behavior. So like I said, none of it is by accident. And as you stated, the things that are surfacing about Nickelodeon in particular, they're in the news right now. These things all have a correlation. There's a correlate on both sides of the camera between porn viewership, the production of pornography, and then sex trafficking, the trafficking of, often young, innocent boys and girls, and sometimes, not so young boys and girls, that you can't separate one from the other. So you have a lot of people who are like all about like, let's rescue the slave workers, let's put an end to sex trafficking, but then they're pro porn. And what they don't realize is they're being hypocrites, right? Because you
How
can't
can they be
support
pro porn?
because people think it's a great expression of yourself. It's harmless. It's a good way to spice up your sex
Oh my
life.
gosh.
Yeah. So these two things are highly, highly correlated, and we now have evidence of that. It's not just some religious-based thing anymore. Even though obviously there is a very spiritual side for people like you and I who are of faith. But honestly, even if you took that out of the conversation, it's irrefutable. These two are very linked,
Right.
and you have one with the other always.
Oh, that makes me kind of feel gross.
Yeah, it's
Not gonna
disgusting.
lie, having
Yeah.
kids brought up, my kids are 21 and 19, and um, I know they were exposed early, both
Yep.
of them,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
whether it
only
was
getting
Disney or Nickelodeon or music videos or
yeah.
whatever. They are far beyond where I ever was at their age, far beyond.
Yeah, but see, those are more mainstream ways. Like those are the ways you get exposed pre-smartphone, right? Or like early days of smartphone. But now it's YouTube, it's Snapchat. The amount of predators that are on Snapchat and some of these apps
Oh,
is
for sure.
disturbing. Yeah.
yeah, TikTok and Insta. And I mean, I get spammed a lot. So, and you
Yes,
probably do too, right? Like it's
tons.
just part of
Yeah,
being a little bit in the public, right?
yeah.
Um, yeah, particular for me, it's Facebook.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we get it. I mean, we're very active on Instagram and lots of followers over there. So, yeah, we get it pretty badly. But again, like you and I are mature adults, we have our adult brains, we have, heads on our shoulders. But when it's a 10-year-old, 11-year-old who's just innocently on their app doing their thing, it's a
And
different
their
story.
hormones are raging and they don't
Yeah,
always understand that, right?
yeah,
They don't
yeah,
have an awareness because parents don't always talk about it either.
yeah.
So what's interesting, so how what's the solution, or what are some of the solutions to some of that early exposure, um since that seems to be a root of a lot of this? How do we cut that down
Well, I
besides
think,
filters and not giving kids their phones? There was some studies about not giving, like, kids shouldn't have phones before they're 16,
yeah, yeah, I've seen
and
some of that
they shouldn't
research.
have social media. Yeah,
14 or
no, they shouldn't
16,
have.
yeah.
Yeah, 14 and then 16 for social media. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that honestly that makes pretty good sense to me. I wouldn't doubt that. I think, when it comes to protecting our young ones, the reality is this is how the conversation changes. Like I think in my dream world, my business is obsolete, right? Like that would be the
Right,
perfect
same,
world. We're far,
same.
yeah, and I think we're very far away from that, unfortunately. If it does happen, or if we at least move in that direction, it will be because we have begun to protect our young ones. So there's four
Mm.
states right now. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but there's four states that have actually added laws that require verification for their age to enter an adult site. Because what happens right now in most places is you have to, there's a little pop-up. You consent that you're over 18 years of age, and all you have to do is click on a box. So when I was
Yeah,
addicted, I clicked on that box all the time. I mean, there's no verification or nothing. So now there's verification processes, and again, people are going to find workarounds. It's a step in the right direction.
yeah.
Texas currently, I don't know how long this is going to last. Texas has actually flat out banned pornography. I don't even know how they did that, but Texas has flat out banned it,
Oh, you
which
gotta
is
love
which is
Texas.
which is really interesting. And you're going to create dynamics where if you tell somebody they can't have it, it's going to make them want it more. So
Yeah,
it's incomplete. However, it's a huge step in the right direction. We know that legislation influences human behavior, whether we like it or not. So I think those are good steps. I think the other side of it is that parents really need to be a lot more on the ball. And I'm a new parent, so I'm not calling parents out and saying you should have done X, Y, Z. I'm just saying I think, you said your kids are 19 and 17. So,
no,
I
19 and 21.
sorry, 19 and 21. So I really
Mhm.
feel it for parents whose kids are like 20 to 30, 20 to 35, because we were getting exposed to the digital stuff before we even really knew what we were up against. Like there was sort of this naivety. Um, I
For
think now,
sure.
yeah,
I didn't know.
yeah, how I mean, and you shouldn't have had to know, right? It shouldn't have been the way it is. However, I would say, so I'm a new parent. My little boy is 5.5 months old, and so we have a different assignment. My wife and I have a different assignment, which is to have conversations about it early and often. If they're going to be on devices, to have conversations with them about what pornography is before they get exposed, so that they're coming to us and that they're not going to get in trouble. But we want to make sure that they feel safe enough to have these conversations with us. It's not really a question of if my son gets exposed, it's a question of when. And my job as a parent, and I think this is where there's been a paradigm shift. My job as a parent is to make these conversations so safe that when he does get exposed, or if something happens that wasn't supposed to happen, he feels comfortable enough to come talk to me about it. And he knows that he's not going to be in trouble. Dad's going to be understanding, and dad's going to be able to guide him through the situation. So the onus is really on me to actually get better as a man and as a parent. I have to be able to do those things so that I can actually protect and defend my child against some of these forces that are out there. And if I fail to do that and he gets exposed and he ends up talking to his friends about it, or he gets maybe something from really bad, sex ed curriculums that are actually quite prevalent where I live, that's actually on me. And so I definitely am all for legislation that protects our young in a way that's appropriate. But legislation in of itself has never been enough. The family unit and the way we view sexuality, the way we have conversations, that has to change. That's got to be where the money's really at for us to actually see things change systemically.
Oh my gosh. You are so dead on with that. And I feel like that those conversations, honestly, with the sexual revolution happening in the 60s,
Yeah,
right? I was
right.
born in 1964. So like that already should have been taking place and it not even close. Right? I
Mm,
mean, in my
wow.
family, because I'm a physician, we talked about all the body parts from the word go,
Good.
using the
Yeah.
using most of the time using the correct names.
Yeah.
Um, um, and then some softer ones when they were little,
Sure.
um, but so it happened in my family that my kids feel comfortable coming to their same sex parent and to talk
Yes.
about those things, right? My son goes to my ex-husband and my daughter usually comes to me.
That's great.
So, right. That doesn't change the fact that they were probably exposed to things that I wasn't even aware of until, frankly, until the pandemic. And that changed a whole bunch of things. Like, what are you watching?
Yeah.
Because we were home and
Yeah.
aware, right? What do you mean you've already watched that show? I didn't even know that show existed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, true. Yeah. Well, the pandemic, I mean, it's a whole other story. Like
That's a
porn
whole
view.
different thing, I know.
Yeah.
And I don't want to walk down that road too far, but
No, 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 sorry. I mean, yeah, we could go down that road as well, but even in conjunction with pornography,
oh,
like we saw
exploded.
huge spike. Yeah, huge spike.
Exploded.
And, Pornhub, the world's biggest porn site, they made their premium membership for free, to help people out who are in need and distressed. And people capitalize, on those offers. And they know if they can get them addicted in a time where they're vulnerable and in great need, then when the cost goes back up to 15, $20 a month, people are going to start paying for it because they're actually hopelessly addicted to it. So again, like there's nothing accidental anymore in this world. It's all by design. It's not by accident. And there's some really nasty, evil agendas out there that are affecting us.
I know. I think we don't always like to. I mean, I'm one of those people that believes the best of people. So, as
Yeah,
naive as that
me
sounds,
too.
for my age, it's still true.
Yeah,
But
that's
I just
great.
want to believe that of people. But I know that I also know that that's also true, right? I can hold both of those things to be true. Um, but it just thinks that people have to be like, just like stop being a
Tell me
jerk.
about it. Yeah,
Just stop
yeah.
being a jerk. Don't be a jerk. And I know they're making their, they're making their living that way. So I want to just shift slightly. And I know we've been talking for a little bit, but how do wives or partners contribute to the problem?
Oh,
And
wow.
on the flip side, how do we stop contributing to the problem? Because I think I would, at least my old self, probably not so much now, I would probably end up being a nag. I would
Mm,
probably shame. I might have shamed somebody, right?
yeah,
Like there's a lot of normal reactions. Maybe I'm not good enough. What is it about me? And
yeah,
then I take that whole role on and go do things to my body to make it look better for my husband, but that still doesn't work. And then I'm not enough. And that plays into my own set of fears as a woman.
yeah.
Um, like there's a lot of things rolling in my head as opposed to, like you said, making that space safe. So go ahead and take it from there.
Oh, what a great question. So I have a colleague, her name's Jolene Wynn, and she works specifically with women whose husbands are porn addicts. And
Awesome.
her standard or her goal for her clients is that they reach such a place where they are secure and healthy within themselves that if their husband never gets better, they will be okay. Now, obviously, that's a little bit idealistic. We know that like nobody wants to be
Right.
hitched to a porn addict. So, like again, there's an idealism there, but I love the premise, which is that I think the best thing a wife can do is control her part of the equation, which is her feelings, her emotions, her thoughts, the words she speaks, the actions she takes. All of those things really matter. And if we were actually just doing this kind of unofficially, but we were going through some stories of people who had really impressive recoveries in our program in the last year or so. And the one thing that I observed is a good handful of them had really supportive wives. And it's interesting because I would say pornography addiction at its core is an intimacy disorder. And for people to really heal from the addiction, they have to improve their ability to experience intimacy. And so a very typical reaction of the woman is, "What's wrong with you? I can't believe you do that," or it's more inward. And so they feel like, "Well, am I not good enough? Maybe I should have been having sex more often or more adventurous or whatever." It's rarely any of those things. Those are actually just the insecurities of the woman that get exposed in those moments and in those situations. And again, we're not letting the guy off the hook when we're saying this. I think it's always important to keep reiterating that. However, what really goes a long way is a woman who can actually support, again, to the best of her abilities, not to ignore your hurt or ignore the betrayal that you feel, because those are very real, but to say provide him what you can, because what we know from the research is that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. And so you being
Mm,
able to provide your spouse connection, meaningful connection, is going to go a long way to his heart feeling a lot more complete, a lot more connected, and that's going to go a long way in his own recovery efforts. Now, on the flip side, what I would say is when women put in their own work, because the to me the optimal woman response is a wife response is she finds out, she feels hurt, she feels betrayed, she's really upset about it. That you want all of those things. You don't want a wife who goes, "Oh, okay, whatever." Like that's worse. That's the worst case
right.
scenario because that means she's already checked out. So we don't want
Yeah,
that.
right.
We want the wife to be upset. It's good that she feels betrayed. It's not that we want it, but you know what I mean. Those are good indicators.
Those are
Um,
normal emotions to feel.
yeah, yes, in a relationship
And
where she cares,
right.
and then for her to go, "Wow, those are some interesting responses. I'm gonna go get some support for them." So what happens often is it's like he's the addict, he's the one with the problem, he needs to go fix his stuff, and then we're gonna be good to go. And what happens is he goes and fixes his stuff, he undergoes this metamorphosis, and he's a different person, and now like she's actually behind. Because she had all these
Right.
insecurities exposed, she had a bunch of maybe trauma even that got reignited by his addiction, and he's healed through a bunch of his stuff, and she hasn't. And the relationship's imbalanced, and it's hard to rebuild trust. And so the best thing a woman can do is take ownership for her stuff. Even if you're 5% of the equation, take care of your 5%.
Does
It goes
matter.
a long, 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 long way, not
Amen.
only to support him in his recovery, but also so that your marriage can actually reach new heights and new levels as he does go through recovery. If you guys can both heal and recover together, again, even if your part's only 5, 10%, that's a lot more valuable and it contributes. I love that word you used earlier. It contributes a lot more meaningfully to the marriage than just saying, yeah, this is his issue, ball's in his court. Hopefully he gets his act together.
Yeah, but I think that's the same for when you're talking again about a food issue or um just a health issue in general. If
Yeah.
we can do the work on ourselves, right? We can, I mean, we know this about even Bible study or personal growth in general, right? Is a big, broad term, right? I can't do work for you. We can only work on ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if at the end of the day, the husband is willing to and to do the work, then again, what you just said was so true, right? We will end up in a really good place that way.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And it's not easy, like you and I are discussing these concepts and it sounds all great in theory. That's really hard to do, and it's really hard to say, man, this guy he's messed up our marriage. Maybe you have kids. This potentially is going to ruin our family. It's not, nobody's just saying, well, you know what? I guess I'll take care of my 10% and I know he's going to do his thing. That it's really, really hard to do. But it is the best way. And it is the best way to stack the odds in your favor of having a healthy, successful marriage and your husband having a healthy, successful recovery. And I would think that for most wives, that would be their goal.
Absolutely, absolutely, 100%, 100%. So let's, I think we're obviously going to have another conversation.
Yeah. Let's do it anytime.
If that's if you're good with that, because there's so much more here. What for my audience, which tends to be female, but I have some men in the audience too. What's the best way I mean, I'm going to put in the show notes how to get a hold of you and all those things. But what
Oh
are
yeah,
some of
yeah.
the things that people can start to do for themselves? Like what we were talking about, looking for that comfort, finding that self-awareness. And if we can take a walk, if we can do so, like that's one of the things that I ask my clients to do, right? Instead of
Mhm.
coming home, like have that snack on your way home so that you're not starving when you hit the door, and so that you're not eating that entire bag of potato chips while you're making dinner, right? Like
Yeah.
what are some of the things that we can do to help that urge and that need in the moment? What are some things that we can do instead of?
Yeah.
Just a couple of things.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of give two categories of response here because the first category is for people who maybe are completely numb. And there are women who are like this as well, but men in particular
Absolutely.
have no idea how to even access it. So I would go to google.com and I would look up the feeling wheel. And this is one of the best tools
Okay.
out there. This is a great way to just start to put language to how you feel. And this is what we do with our clients. So we have a little bit of our own version, but it's more or less the same. And with that feeling wheel, we're just giving them language to describe how they feel. Because for me personally, I was very numb. I was very numb. I had lost, several friends to suicide in high school. I had been through some things, and I just learned to suppress, to shut off. And I didn't know. I didn't know where to start. So the feeling wheel was like a lifesaver for me. It gave me language. And for some people, that's going to sound ridiculous and very primitive, but trust me, for somebody who is really shut off, this thing is a game changer. So I think that's a great way for people to start. The second thing is you need to find a mode for processing. Okay, a mode for processing. So for some people, that might be talking to a friend, or for others who maybe don't have that comfortability to share with someone, they don't have that safe person, journaling is a better avenue. But one of those two are great places to start for you to be able to process, to gain an understanding. And that really goes a long way. I always say if you're journaling, again, the question you always want to ask yourself if you're trying to understand it better is what is it offering me? You can do this with food too. Wow, I just
Yep. What
binged.
am
I
I
just ate
getting
a
out
whole,
of this?
yeah, what am I getting out of this? What is this thing offering me? How did I end up here? Right? Those kinds of prompts go a really long way when you're journaling. And I would say if you do want to talk with someone, maybe you hear the idea of journaling and your blood just kind of boils because you're like, I hate journaling, and we have guys, guys don't like journaling all the time. So then we ask them, who is the safest person in your life that
Yeah.
if they knew all your dirty secrets, they still wouldn't judge you? That's the person that you need to go start talking to and verbally processing with. And hopefully they have the presence of mind to maybe ask a couple prompts. But even if they don't, just the act of engaging with another person, forming that kind of open, transparent connection, very, very healing. Like we talked about earlier, that's the real like opposite of addiction. It's building those meaningful
It's
connections. So
connection.
those are good places to start.
Oh my gosh, I love that. In fact, I will in the show notes, I will put a link to a feeling wheel, and
Do it.
that goes
Yeah.
so long. I was in 2018-ish, I was pretty numb because of just life, and I had learned to handle my emotions by smushing it all down. And you don't
Yeah.
feel the happy, and you don't feel the sad, you don't feel anything. You're just numb, and the it's like a bandwidth, right? Just becomes so shallow.
Yes.
But yeah, I often say, even now, even though I'm much more aware now, it's been a lot of time. Like my daughter has 5,000 emotions, and I'm good if I've got five,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like, or
100%.
15, right? But she's got a million emotions, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah, my wife's like that too. Or she's got one emotion, but it's like a 1,000 out of 100. And my
I
emotions
know.
register like a 10 out of 100. So yeah, I get
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's the same. I know. I'm sad and disappointed, and she's like, "No, mom, I'm not just that. I'm these other things." Like I don't even have
Yes.
the right words, right?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, that's hilarious. So yeah, I'll put that in our show notes for sure. Any last thing you'd like to finish with, and we will have more conversation, I think. There's
Yeah,
just so
for
much
sure.
good here. I just love these conversations. It's great. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
we have a daily podcast called Unleash the Man Within. We actually have a pretty strong female listenership as well. And because we've been doing it daily for several years now, we've talked about pretty much anything you can imagine. And we actually answer listener questions on there. We'll even do some live coaching. We'll bring people on depending on their situation. So if people want to learn from other people's experiences, or you want to see maybe just get some more information, that's the best place to go. Unleash the Man Within is the podcast, and it's everywhere podcasts are found.
Yeah, and it's a great podcast, y'all. He has some really, really amazing content there, and like your latest blog about men being men, and that's really that's what we'll talk about the next time you're on, because
Okay.
I think it's really important, and I feel like that also plays into women being able to be women, and women
Yeah.
being able to be healthy women in our own femaleness is to have that healthy male partner. So
Yeah.
um yeah, we'll talk about that next time. Thank
Okay.
you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Sathiya. That was an amazing conversation. I really appreciate your time today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Dr. Chris.
Absolutely.